In reality, too many parents treat their kids like assets rather than a human being. They invest time, money, energy, and in return they expect a dividend of good grades, sports trophies, social status. All the above. You recognize conditional love when you finally tell somebody no. When you finally don't do something that they want you to do, usually who the real them is. You don't know somebody until you tell them no. So you tend to see when a child is told who they're supposed to be for 18 years, when they reach the age of 25 and have no idea who they actually are, they're successful, but they're empty. They can tell you that little Johnny loves basketball, but does little Johnny actually love basketball, or does he love the attention that pays him when he's talking about basketball? Hey guys, I'm back with another episode of Mental Wealth. This podcast is used to express thoughts, experiences, and lessons. I aim to be as transparent as possible. If you enjoy an episode, please don't forget to like, comment, and tell a friend. Thank you. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you that while I am a licensed therapist, this podcast is designed for educational and informational purposes only. The strategies and tools that we discuss here at Mental Wealth are meant to help you invest in your own self, but they do not constitute or supplement professional medical advice or diagnosis. Listening to this episode does not establish a therapist-client relationship. If you have specific mental health needs, please consult with a professional in your area. And as always, if you or someone you know is in crisis, please call 988 or visit your nearest emergency room. All week, I've been sitting in various therapy sessions, and a constant thing kept coming up: the pressure that parents put on kids. So I'm dealing with kids. They struggle with the ability to feel like they can be vulnerable to their parents, talk about anything they're going through. So that's what brought me to today's episode: the pressure that parents put on kids. Granted, I didn't create this episode to bash parents and everything, because the first thing people are going to say is, do you have kids of your own? I think that is completely redundant, because I only have experience with kids. I have no experience doing therapy with adults. The only people I've ever talked to are people my age and below, primarily kids. But I will say this: it actually there's no qualifications to being a parent. You can just have kids. There's not a test you have to take. There's not a license you got to get. Somebody can just get pregnant, have a kid without any parenting classes. People don't do home ec anymore in the schools. So parents are rarely the expert. I hate to say it like that, but that's just what it is. There's a co-living situation. So we live together. I pay all the bills and everything, but I don't interact with you. I don't know what's happening throughout your day. I don't know what your interests are. Only thing I do is pay bills and feed you. Now, I'm not saying this because there are a lot of wonderful parents out here who provide, who meet their kids' needs in various ways. This is mainly about the parents that need a little bit of work. And it's always made me think of the situation sort of like stock prices. Now imagine we're looking at this chart of stocks. I'm a heavy stock guy myself. But imagine that we're looking at a chart of stocks. When the line goes up, investors are happy. When the line goes down, they panic. Now replace that stock with a child. In reality, too many parents treat their kids like assets rather than a human being. They invest time, money, energy, and in return they expect a dividend of good grades, sports trophies, social status, all the above. In today's episode, we're going to look at the fine line between encouragement and control, and why conditional love is the most dangerous currency we have. The roots. Why do parents do it? Now I'm going to talk about a lot of narcissism. Not too much though, but just a little sprinkle of it. The Narcissistic Extension. This concept is when a parent feels that their child is not their own separate person, but an extension of themselves. It tends to be like, if the child fails, the parents feel like they failed. If the child wins, the parents feel like they win. In a way, it's parents living through their child. So the kid is never really able to form their own thoughts, opinions, interests, anything. It's always directly influenced by the parent, which eventually leads to somebody not knowing who they are. Only thing I know is what my parents want to be. This is a big concept, because when you deal with parenting, You're parenting your child to prepare them for the world when they're not in your house. And that's usually when a lot of young people fall on their face. They turn 18, 16, whatever, and their parents treat them like adults without truly preparing them for the world. So that's why we tend to see a lot of young people fall on them faces early in life. And I also see that there's usually a cycle of this. So usually the parent turned 18, their parents kicked them out or whatever. So they do it to their child. So it's almost like, well, I struggled, so you gotta struggle. Dang, we can't create a cycle of things getting better. Why are you passing down the struggle to me? Pass me down something I can actually use, not struggling. And a lot of parents are passing down a struggle. Another thing we see is the fear of irrelevance. So many parents push because they're terrified. They think if my child isn't special, they won't survive. They project their own anxieties about the world onto their kids. And this also drastically alters somebody's perception. I remember growing up and everything, and I remember when my niece was coming of age. And truly through observing her, I learned that fear is taught. There's been a lot of various experiments in psychology showing kids around dangerous things, majority infants, and them not having the reaction that a grown person would. There's various experiments and stuff on this, so you guys go look it up. You go look it up if you don't believe me. But what I've learned from this is that fear is taught. So if my parents are scared of something, or there are certain things that they avoid, then I avoid it. Because inherently, if it's bad for my parents, then I would assume it's bad for me. Which in reality, this affects risk-taking ability. So when I go back to my own family, I see an adverse ability to be able to take risks. People have been taught how to save. They've never been taught how to do anything past that. So it makes you be very conservative in your decision making, and it makes it very hard to start that business you always wanted to start, or to go back to school and do this thing you always wanted to do. You're constantly thinking about the fears that your parents had, and it shaped the way you see everything. Also, we had the vicarious redemption. This is parents trying to fix their own past regrets through their child. I refereed for about a year and a half, so you always have the dad who's at the games screaming at the coach, screaming at the referees, screaming at everybody. But that same dad is the dad who sat the bench at that age. So in a way, they're kind of trying to live through their kids. And I hate to say it like this, but if the dad isn't coordinated or anything, it's going to be very rare that the child is coordinated, or mom, or whatever. If your parents aren't coordinated, they don't have the skills, it kind of doesn't prepare you. But that's why I say a lot of times people pass down the struggle. Now we're going to talk about support versus control, and we're going to define the difference. Support. I believe you have the capacity to be able to handle this challenge. Now, this builds confidence. This makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I can go do anything. Now, you have to deal with pressure. You need to handle this challenge or you will disappoint me. Now, this creates an anxiety. Now, I'm worried about, all right, if I don't do it, if I don't get this accomplished in the way my parents want me to have it accomplished, now I'm going to feel like a failure. But all of this is just conditional love. I love you on the condition that you do something for me. This also builds on my last episode I just did about emotional abuse. I think a lot of people are getting conditional love from their parents and they don't realize it. You recognize conditional love when you finally tell somebody no. When you finally don't do something that they want you to do, you'll see who the real them is. You might get yelled at, cussed at, or they might wholeheartedly agree with you. You don't know somebody until you tell them no. That makes sense. Conditional love usually affects the whole house. So if you win, we get pizza. If you lose, we get pillow sandwiches. But what it teaches you is that you're not worthy of love when you are not performing. So this affects the identity. It affects everything about it. I think an important thing to always remember, though, is that not all stress is bad. Now, there's good stress, there's bad stress. I think we tend to only talk about the bad stress, but I mean, you die in the comfort zone. A big problem I also see with a lot of kids, the parents keep them so far in the comfort zone that they don't know how to do anything they don't want to do. And I think a big part about being an adult, having responsibility, just growing up, is you're going to have to do things you don't want to do. I got to go to work tomorrow on Martin Luther King Day. There's various things that growing up, the more you get used to doing things you don't want to do, is going to be easier to do things you want to do. Because everything isn't going to be stimulating. Some things are going to be very mundane and boring, and you just got to get it done. Like paperwork and all the various stuff that people have to get done just to do things. You got to get very comfortable being uncomfortable. Stress, in a way, helps us focus, but too much stress makes us crash. And I think a big part of this with people that are about my young age. So you tend to see when a child is told who they're supposed to be for 18 years, when they reach the age of 25 and have no idea who they actually are, they're successful, but they're empty. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I still have no fulfillment in who I am. So I did everything my parents wanted me to do. I became successful, everything else, but it still doesn't give me any fulfillment. And so that's why I see when people talk about all the time, like, you can't buy happiness, because you can have all the money in the world and have no fulfillment. You can do everything that your parents had on the list of objectives for you to do since birth, and you could still accomplish all that and still feel empty. I think it's very important to find who you are and to find your interest and pour into that. And what I also see is children of high pressure parents often become people pleasers. They tend to learn to scan a room and adapt to others' needs to feel safe and abandon their own boundaries. And this goes into the kids not feeling like they can be vulnerable with their parents. What I've been observing in my time of doing what I do, a lot of parents miss the mark. They completely miss the mark on all of it. They don't even know who their kids are. They can tell you that little Johnny loves basketball and everything, but does little Johnny actually love basketball, or does he love the attention that dad pays him when he's talking about basketball? That's just something to think about. But what I have learned about the situation is, as a parent, if your kids feel like they cannot come to you and talk to you about the problems that they're dealing with, anything, I think you failed as a parent. The biggest part about being a parent is about guiding and giving your kids the things that you didn't have. But I think a lot of parents, they treat it like who had it the worst. I remember growing up, like, I would talk about different problems and stuff I had. Granted, I don't mean to beat up my mom or whatever, but she was a single mom, so she went through a lot trying to raise us by herself. But I often found myself, when I wanted to talk about something I was feeling, any of my feelings, I struggled. Because anytime somebody would talk about how they felt, she would talk about how she feels. So it turned into a who had it the worst concept. Parents mess up. They mess up doing this all the time. They're like, well, when I was your age, I had to do this. We had to walk to school. I didn't have anything, and you should be grateful for the stuff you have. And in reality, everybody has their own unique experiences. Everybody has their own unique struggles. Just because you think your struggle is worse than somebody else doesn't actually make it worse than somebody else. And actually, what we're doing is we're passing down the struggle, and we're invalidating how somebody else feels, because you assume that your experience was worse than theirs. So how dare they have these feelings? And I often see the pressure of having good parents. We only talk about the pressure kids feel when they don't have good parents, but the pressure that kids deal with when they have good parents is also just as bad, because the parents are constantly throwing it in their face. You have more opportunities than me. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? And in a way, they're comparing the child version of them to their own child, so it never lets anybody be heard, because the parents, they might have a valid point, but it doesn't invalidate how somebody feels. It doesn't invalidate everything they're saying. Just because I had it better than what my parents had doesn't mean any of my struggles are less real. They're completely real. Parents completely missed the mark by invalidating how a kid feels, because the next time a kid is struggling with something, you're going to be the last person to hear about it, and that doesn't help anybody. I think parents should do a better job of creating a safe place for people to talk about their feelings without taking it personal. Because that's another thing that happens a lot. As soon as you talk about how you feel, well, mom, I kind of felt depressed or this or that, they take it personal. I provided so much for you. How do you feel depressed? And so then now you can't get anything done. And the next time I feel like it, you will be the last one to know. Taking it personal is actually the worst thing you can do. And I've always disliked this about parents, because when your boss tells you something at work, you're not trying to take it personal. But when it comes to your kid, you take everything else personal. I think part of the problem is picking and choosing what we want to take personal, what we don't. How am I talking about how I feel? You take it personal. These aren't your feelings. These are my feelings. Give me some kind of validation. Create a safe place, something. Do something. But what you're doing currently is not working. Now, for the parents listening, hopefully all my ranting and everything didn't push you guys away. How to shift. Praise the process. Stop saying great job getting an A and start saying, I saw how hard you studied. I'm proud of your discipline. Or you can, the car ride home rule. This is a big, after a game or event, don't critique them. Say one thing you loved when they were playing. I love watching you play. I loved how hard you were playing something, because the kid is already beating themselves up. I already played a terrible game. You want me to get in the car ride just to get cussed out the whole ride? Oh, at least tell me something I did good. Or for everything you tell me I did wrong, tell me something I did well. Instead of me just only leaving a conversation with everything I did wrong. Because if I leave a conversation with everything I did wrong, then I won't even know anything I did right. And I think a lot of times by parents leading with what you did wrong, you never know what you did. For the adult children listening, how do we heal? You separate your voice. You have to identify which thoughts are yours and which thoughts are your parents. By doing this, you're able to find who you are and common misconceptions that your parents taught you that are completely false. You might have to change everything about you, move something. Also, redefining success. You are allowed to pursue a career that makes you happy, even if it doesn't make your parents proud when they're telling their friends. Because a big thing I also see with parents too is they tell all their kids' business. You're not telling none of your business. You're not talking about how your husband cheats on you or all the abuse that happens in your household, but your kid fails a test and you call everybody. Your kid has a bad day and you call and tell everybody their business. You don't talk about none of your business. You don't talk about none of your struggles, any of it. You don't even talk about how you're barely feeding your kids, but we're only talking about your child's struggles. And then you're not even offering advice. It's just a talking point amongst friends so they can have a conversation. Don't use my struggles to have your conversation. If you're going to use my struggles, throw some of your struggles in there too. Don't be sitting here and talk about all the stuff I'm going through. Talk about all the nights you went in that bed crying alone and stuff. They don't want to have those conversations though. I think it's important to realize your child isn't your retirement plan. They're not your trophy case. They have their own life. If this episode hit a nerve, share it with a sibling, somebody. And if you don't take anything else from this, what I do want you to take away from, it's okay to be you. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not conform to what everybody wants around you. Find you, and hopefully you can find purpose. And I think that about wraps up today's episode. If you enjoyed everything, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be back with you for another one. Peace.